Welcome to an all spooky season edition of Roundtable Mindset,
where we're serving up all things spooky and Halloween for the month of October, and we're going to be dishing up perspectives on topics that we normally do not dare touch.
Well, hello and welcome back to Roundtable Mindset. This is Jamie.
And I'm Mahlon.
And we're here for our last spooky episode of the season.
I know, can you believe it? That went by way too fast.
I know, especially since after this, I won't have anything else to say other than exciting episodes. So we need to come up with something else.
I know, it's so funny because I was talking to my daughter as I was getting ready to record today, and I said, "Oh, we're recording our last Halloween episode." And she goes, "Are you kidding?" She goes, "You just started recording." I said, "Yes, but we have to do it in advance." So she's thinking that we're done and it's not even the middle of October. And I'm like, no, just done recording. But it made me start reflecting. I'm like, we've already done four episodes. That's just was too fast. It was too quick.
I know. I don't know that I'm ready to jump in and have like an all spooky podcast, but this sure has been fun. So.
Yeah. Well, and I like that too, because we get a little bit of a variety. I listen to a couple other podcasts that are just dedicated to true crime or dedicated to paranormal, and it's interesting and I love it, but I also get exhausted from it. So I know there's times where I just have to kind of back away from it and go listen to something else, because variety is, after all, the spice of life. So,
well, yes, variety is the spice of life, but I was trying to come up with something pithy and funny, and I just don't have anything. So
okay, because I could see your face, and I knew, like, as soon as you opened your mouth to say something, like, she has nothing. She has nothing.
But okay, so I'm going to kick it over to you then.
Yeah, well, no, actually, I was going to ask you something real fast. So I want to know what, anything exciting happened during the week for you, because I want to share something that happened for me. So, since the last time we recorded, my family, it was my wife and my daughter and I, we went and saw Beetlejuice the musical.
I didn't know Beetlejuice was a musical.
Well, my daughter noticed or was telling us about Beetlejuice on Broadway. Well, they have a traveling show that goes around to, places throughout the United States. And where I live, we have a civic center, and it came here for about 5 days. And we got to go on opening night to see it. And I've been to, Hamilton and Newsies and a couple others. I mean, I haven't gone to an extensive amount, but I tell you what, it was pretty fun. Like, the character who played Beetlejuice broke the fourth wall and spoke to a lot of the audience members, and there was a lot of jokes. I wouldn't say it's a kid show by any means, but it was really kind of fun. And the only thing that bothered me about it is when I didn't know anything about the Broadway show, I just had in my mind the movie Beetlejuice.
Which was fantastic.
It was
fantastic. One of my favorites when I was a kid.
I think we saw that together at your parents' theater when we were kids.
Because
I just remember watching that movie and it was like, this is the pinnacle of special effects and the movie magic. And little did I know, not even 10 years later, my mind would be blown again. But Beetlejuice is an iconic movie. So I was going into that thinking, I'm going to watch them make a musical out of the movie. And I would say they got inspiration from the movie. So it was just kind of fun to go and watch something that I was familiar with. I didn't get what I expected, which was kind of odd at first, but I think it turned out even better once I got through it. I will say I enjoyed the first act a lot better than the second, just because I think it was probably more tied closer to the movie than I would say the second part. But it was definitely worth seeing. So I just wanted to just share that with you, Jamie, because I know we both kind of like that movie, but I had never heard of Beetlejuice the musical before, or I think it was just called Beetlejuice, but I call it the musical, but it was kind of fun.
That's awesome. No, I think I loved the movie, and every time I saw Michael Keaton on screen after that, it was tainted with Beetlejuice on top of his character. So to watch, like, what was that one where he played like the president or CEO of McDonald's or something, and the whole time I'm just imagining Beetlejuice, like.
Yeah. Not that you asked, but fun fact for me, that was the first Michael Keaton movie that I thought he was a really bad person in, the McDonald's story.
Yes. I know.
after it was done, I was like, first of all, how could you do that, Michael Keaton? And then I was like, that character, if that was real, ugh.
It was yeah. Although it had a whole Breaking Bad dynamic to me, like bad guy is actually a good guy who's been hurt kind of thing. So, but this isn't a movie review podcast either. So we should probably move on.
Sorry for having a little fun with you, Jamie. Good grief.
Well, I just want to get to our guests because I'm excited for spooky season.
Yes, I know. Okay, sorry. I just wanted to segue because I was like, that was something I don't do every day. Okay, so for the food for thought, this is going to be different. And some of this has to shape, not that I had a bad week by any means. My week was pretty good. In fact, I just told you I did something fun with the wife and the daughter. So, but this kind of stuck out to me for the last couple weeks, and I didn't know how to approach it here with you because, again, I know you like to think of things in strength-based, I think that's what you call it, strength-based mindset. I like to look for the lining, the silver lining in all situations and look for the best. However, this week when I was contemplating a good food for thought, the only thing that came to my mind was sometimes people just suck. And I wanted to soften that a little bit because that's a very strong statement. But it's not even a question, Jamie. I just kind of wanted to get your reaction for that because I've experienced some things over the course of the last month where I try to look at the positive side. I try to look for that silver lining. And the only thing that comes up for me is there are times when people are just difficult. And I'm putting myself in that category. There's times in my life I can look back and I could say I was kind of a butt when I didn't need to be, but I was just because that's what I felt like in the moment. And there's no explanation, I go back and tell my kids, why did you do that? I don't know. And I'm like, I don't know. It's not a good answer. Well, if I turn that inwards when I'm acting in that way, or I see people acting that way, I think the answer is sometimes that's just how people feel. So no question this week, just a statement to see what's your reaction to that?
Well, it's funny because when you texted that to me, I was like, that's perfect. It's perfect. And mostly I was excited to chat about this with you because I was like, yes, sometimes people do suck and I'm a people and I suck sometimes too, right? Like,
yep. Me too.
And in those times when I suck, I always think about like, normally I can go back and look at why. Like, I was hurt. Have you ever heard of HALT?
Well, I've heard that word before, but I think that's an acronym for something, yes. Which I haven't heard the acronym before.
Yes, it is an acronym. It was a wise friend of mine once said, like, there's certain times when you shouldn't probably like get into, like, you have to be cautious about how you are with the people that you care about during HALT. And that's hungry, angry, lonely, tired, right? So normally in those times when I really suck at peopling, I typically can go back and be like, yeah, I was really frustrated with this thing and that made me lash out here. Or, I wasn't feeling my best and my cup wasn't very full. So then I wasn't great with my family or whatever. And so that's kind of what I thought of when you had shared that idea with me, and how I suck sometimes too. So, and here's the other thing. When I experience those times with other people and I walk away from an interaction, I'm like, wow, that guy just sucks or whatever. I usually stop and I try to stop and think, okay, what happened to that person? Like, you know what I mean? Like everybody's experienced 100 ways of life before we encounter them as a human being. And there's so many other facets to their life that is outside of the interaction that we have with that person that it's super important for me to stop and think back like, okay, there's a whole part of you that I don't have any idea. I know this tiny little speck of your life. And that was the interaction that we just had and it sucked. But there's probably something else going on around that. To make that interaction the way it was. So that's kind of what I've thought of when you brought that up.
And I don't disagree with that. And at the same time, I want to be like, hold on to your chair there. But I want to be like, that's not my problem. Like I get, we all have lives, right? And we interact with one another. And there's moments in our lives when we intersect at not the greatest time. But there has been people in my life who have repeatedly just been, under that category of people just suck. And you wonder why. You know, what, to your point, what happened to you as a kid? What happened to you in the last week? Trying to give benefit of the doubt. And everything you said is a great adult response. But I'm just going to be completely transparent with you, Jamie. There's sometimes I don't want to be an adult. I just want to be like, stop sucking.
I love it. That's a very adult response, and I just don't want to go there today. So
no, well, and again, that's kind of where, when I was thinking over this, that's where I was like, okay, I fall into that category. So this isn't me looking down my nose at other people, but I just want to understand sometimes. I think where I'm getting myself at is I don't want to invest in trying to understand all the time why somebody's acting that way. I think I just need to get to a point that says, okay, this person's just that way for today. Maybe it's this way for the month, or maybe this is who this person's personality is. And I just need to just accept it and move on with my day. Because bottom line, sometimes people just suck. And that's my food for the thought. Food for thought for the week.
And quite frankly, whether you accept it or not is probably not going to change it, right? So, you know, just for your own well-being to be like, I would encourage you not to assume that one interaction is every interaction, right? Like if you have a terrible interaction with someone, go try again because it probably really was the day. But for me, like literally, if I can stop and remember 99% of the time it's not about me, it's usually about what's happening for them. It helps me just move on and give some grace because I know I've needed grace before too.
Right. And I'm not saying that I'm above that. I know there's times when I need grace and I'm going to give grace. But there are moments, there's people in our life. And I just want this to go out into the podcasting universe to see if anybody else can recognize or sympathize with me. It just sucks interacting with some of these people just because there's nothing that I've done. There's nothing I can do. And sometimes I'm that person and I recognize that. And I think what I'm trying to get to is I still have to interact with these individuals. But for me, interacting with them sometimes is just pain after pain after pain. Because I want them to be different, because I know they are better than what they're acting now. And sometimes I just need to learn I don't need them to be fixed in order for me to interact with them. And I have to come to terms with this is just who these people are. And again, there's moments in my life that I've been that person and I'll probably be that person again. And I try not to live in that space too long, but I have to recognize when people do. They may stay a lot longer than I would, or they may live in that space permanently, but I just need to accept it and move on because I sit there and try to figure out what's wrong with them or why can't they act a certain way or how can I help them be a better person. And sometimes it's just the answer is people suck. So that's it. That's all I got.
I just want to validate that for you, Mahlon, and say yes.
I don't need validation. I'm just putting that out there.
Well, and ironically, the days that I feel like are probably the days that I suck the most are the days when I just feel like people suck. You know what I mean? Like, right. Those are the days that I'm probably not in my best space either. So.
Oh, yeah. I've thrown my hands up many a time just being like, I can't. And that's not what this is about. But again, we've spent so much time. And even now I hear you're trying to be that reason, that sound of the voice of reason and the adult response. And yes, I love doing all those things. But there are times when it's just like, nope, I'm done. I don't want to. And what I really want to ask those people is, and even ask myself when I recognize it is, why do you think treating other people that way is going to make your day better? Or does that validate your feelings? Because it doesn't in either case. But that's a whole nother subject, I guess. So,
well, and I don't want you to feel like I'm above the grind myself. It's not like I don't get down in the trenches there too sometimes. So, I just beat myself up a lot for it when I get down there too. So I try not to go there as often as I can.
Wouldn't want to live there, but it's nice to visit from time to time.
Oh, Mahlon. Oh, well, that's a great food for thought, I think. So.
Well, it's honest. It might not be great, but at least it's honest. Anyways, well, who do we have today? Who's our guest?
We have a special guest with us today. Mari comes to us. I've known Mari for a few years now. She's a good friend of my dad, and they do a writing group together. So I was really excited to reach out to Mari and talk about this topic with her. And we're going to discuss the Day of the Dead, Dia de los Muertos, with my friend Mari. So welcome to the podcast, Mari.
Thanks for having me, guys. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Hi, Mari.
Hi. Hello.
I'm just gonna say this. So, Jamie, before you came on, spoke very highly of you. Of course, you guys have a relationship. I just want everyone knowing this is the first time Mari and I are actually getting to talk. So, Mari, I just want to say welcome. Thanks for coming.
Thank you, Mahlon. Thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity to share with everybody a little bit about my culture and my family traditions. And I used to be a former university instructor of Spanish, so there's that part of me that's been retired for a while that is also longing to educate. So well, I really appreciate it.
We are sponges, so maybe start just kind of introducing yourself a little bit, since Mahlon hasn't met you before. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your background.
Yeah, well, my name is Mari Beck, and I am an author and a self-care advocate. Jamie's right. I know Jamie through her dad, Jim, who's also a fellow author. And we meet monthly to read our projects and bounce ideas off of each other with a larger group from across the country. We have authors that come to us from Seattle and from Houston and Chicago, as well as all across the state. So we just have a good time talking with each other about writing and projects.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes. Very cool. So, Mari, I have a very limited understanding of Dia de los Muertos from my Spanish class days, but I would love to hear more about kind of what the holiday is and when it's celebrated and where it's celebrated and things like that. So,
absolutely.
And the significance. Like, what's the significance of that day?
Well, if you think about it in the simplest terms, it is my family's Memorial Day, essentially, is what it is. So most people think of it as Mexico's Halloween, or other countries that celebrate it as Halloween, but that's actually not what it is. It has spooky origins, which I'd love to share with you, because people mostly know about the Day of the Dead being celebrated from November 1st and November 2nd. But honestly, it starts October 31st as preparation and ends on November 4th. So it's part of our cultural tradition. But if you didn't know, it started more than 3,000 years ago with the pre-Columbian tribes of Mesoamerica that celebrated loved ones they had lost. And these tribes included the Aztecs, which you may have heard of, and other Nahua tribes. And the Day of the Dead was originally celebrated in August by Mesoamericans. And the celebration lasted for a month, if you can believe that. And I kind of got a kick out of you guys talking about the spooky origins of everything, because while it's become a much tamer and much more family-friendly holiday, it did have its spooky origins back in those times. So I don't know how much you know about what came before Day of the Dead. Did you remember, Jamie, at all from your Spanish class, or Mahlon?
No, not at all. That was a long time ago, Mari.
I was like, first of all, I want to say thank you, Mari, for thinking that I could go back that far in my memory. And two, I barely know what this holiday is, let alone know the historical backstory. So I would love to hear some of those spooky origins.
Well, there are some spooky origins. So it was believed that once a person died, their soul went to a place called Mahlon, which was known as the land of the dead. So in Mayan culture, it was known as Xibalba. There, a soul was met by like 9 lords of the underworld. So you see where it starts to get spooky, right? And once they completed a series of challenges, they would be greeted by the Lord and Lady of Death. So it was like Survivor for the dead. The soul went through 9 trials, and in each of the 9 levels of the underworld, each level was ruled by a Lord of the Night. And the dead had to face several challenges, dangerous challenges, not just after being dead, but such as crossing rivers of scorpions and blood. They also had to survive 6 houses filled with deadly challenges. These were the dark house, the razor house, the jaguar house, the fire house, and the bat house.
Mary, was dying not enough?
Exactly.
Okay. Exactly what I was thinking. I was like, you died. Where's the rest in peace coming into all of this? Now you have to do all of these acts?
And what's hilarious is that the final challenge was a ball game against the gods.
Like baseball?
It was a form of baseball. It was with a stone ball, but the ending on that one was not so good if you were the loser. But yeah, so it was a challenge. But like maybe where some of these things that everybody thinks about on the family-friendly Day of the Dead, we have what we call an altar that we put up starting on the 31st of October, which is Halloween. And we have altars and food and all kinds of things that we put on this altar. And it has its origins in this underworld mythology where family members provided food, water, and tools to aid the deceased in the difficult journey, which lasted 4 years.
Oh, I see.
Yes. And instead, here it lasts 4 days.
Wow. Okay.
So, yeah. So the tradition was inspired people of today to leave food and offerings for their loved ones. But really, it looks like nothing compared to the family-friendly, holiday that we know now, which most people do confuse with Halloween. And it really has to do with the fact that obviously Mexico and much of Mesoamerica was colonized by the Spanish and the Europeans, who already had contributions made in Halloween-like traditions. So, for example, the Spaniards brought with them All Saints' Day and All Souls' Day, which was a Catholic holiday. And during All Souls' Day, they would leave wine and pan de animas, which was spirit bread, at the grave of their loved ones. They would also cover the graves with flowers and light candles to illuminate the dead souls' way back to their homes. And these traditions are still used today in the current Day of the Dead.
Do those holidays intersect then? The All Saints' Day and Day of the Dead?
They do. So it's the 1st and 2nd of November. So the 1st and 2nd of November is when the Day of the Dead officially begins, and it lasts until November 4th. Now, most people only think of it as being 1 day, but if you're in my family, it lasts 4 days. It starts on the October 31st, which is Halloween here, but in Hispanic cultures, and I can only speak to the Mexican cultures, even though Day of the Dead is celebrated. It is celebrated in North America. Mexico is the country that it's most associated with. In Central America, where places like Guatemala are known to have large Dia de los Muertos celebrations. South America includes like Ecuador, Brazil, Bolivia, and other Andean regions. And the Caribbean, even the Dominican Republic, has a large Dia de los Muertos celebration that incorporates voodoo religion. So it gets spookier and less spookier depending on where you go. But yeah, with the arrival of the Spanish, the two cultures combined their beliefs to begin what is now known as Dia de los Muertos, or Day of the Dead.
I see. So where would you say it's the spookiest?
That depends. I mean, me personally, the Dominican Republic with the voodoo religion kind of makes me pause. I have a family member who actually lives in the Dominican Republic, and will say that it's pretty spooky when that celebration comes about. It's not her favorite, but that I can't attest to that. In my family, it's a loving, wonderful Memorial Day. So my mom, and Jamie, this is where you may have seen it on Facebook, where I posted my mom's celebration, which took up an entire room, where she spent days ahead of time cooking favorite meals and breads and cultural foods, traditional foods, for different members of our family who had passed on, including my grandfather, my great-grandfather, cousins, great aunts, children. And that's the important thing to differentiate. So November 1st, usually in my family, is where we celebrate the children. Mm-hmm. It's called Dia de los Angelitos, Day of the Little Angels. And that is when we celebrate children who died too young, and altars are decorated with toys and candy for the children's spirits to have and play with. And that's where you'll see the sugar skulls. If you've seen those decorated sugar skulls that are edible, yes, are placed on the children's altars and are food for the children that day. November 2nd is the day that we celebrate adults who have passed away. So my mom will do 2 separate days for that. And then she'll create an altar. And now this is a really interesting little fact. You can have different levels of altars, so different shelves and things. And there are some very elaborate ones. And you might ask yourself, like, so how do we know as a family which one to do? The common altar has 3 levels, and it goes back to that Mesoamerican tradition where each level represents heaven, earth, and the underworld. Oh. And then you place certain things on that altar. So the things that I would put on that altar would be a picture of my loved one, a glass of water to satisfy the thirst of the spirit, salt to preserve the soul while it visits, a cross, rosary, or a picture of the Virgin of Guadalupe might also be incorporated, copal, which is an incense made of pine to elevate prayers, and then any favorite things. So like my grandfather liked his tequila. So my mom would put a bottle of tequila on the altar with a small glass. And on that night, she would light candles all around the altar, and then she would pour him a glass for that evening. Yeah. Yeah.
So Mary, I have some questions.
Yeah. Ask me.
Sorry. Okay. So we're getting into altars and putting things out for the dead and having the spirits come. So
yeah.
First of all, I know very little of this day, which I mentioned before. So these are all me really trying to understand this, but putting out an altar for loved ones is the thought. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm going back to our Memorial Day that we do here in the United States, and we remember, we go out to the cemetery, we put flowers down, and we just take a moment to remember our loved ones. Where I'm having a little bit of this seems a little bit more than that for me is in your culture is the building of these altars and putting things out for the spirits to play with, to drink, to interact with. So it's almost like you're expecting the spirit of your loved one to come and visit and partake in the drinks or the water or whatever. I'm just curious, is that really the intention of these altars, or is it really more of I'm the equivalent of me going to the cemetery and putting fresh flowers out and remembering my loved ones and just taking that moment to reflect?
Well, excellent questions. First of all, we also go to the cemetery and do up the graves and do something similar at the graves. So there are families who will go out to the cemetery and do what we do in Memorial Day here in the United States, or who will take it up to that next level. I mean, and you'll see if you go to any cemetery, usually in your hometown or where you live, you'll see some graves decorated with people's favorite items or lights or angels or things like that throughout the year, and especially during Memorial Day, right? So we have that as well. And it just depends on who you ask. I would say the smaller the town, the bigger the faithfulness to the tradition that the spirit truly is going to visit. Does that make sense? We have more of our celebrations take place in rural areas. I would say that my family here in the United States celebrates the Day of the Dead as a way to reconnect with our culture. However, my family who lives in the city in Mexico does not partake in this celebration in the same way. They would if they were visiting our relatives in the countryside, so to speak, but they themselves would not build altars or go to these lengths or extents in the more urban areas. I think it just depends on who you ask. It was just a way for my mom to keep our culture and her connection to her family alive here, because we're really the only ones here in the United States. The rest of my family is in Mexico. So it was just a way for her to do that. But, is it really the expectation? My mom truly, truly does believe that the veil between life and death is its thinnest at this time of the year. And she truly does believe that if she makes the food, or she doesn't expect it to be gone overnight. Does that make sense? She doesn't expect the tequila to be gone the next day, but things to disappear. But she fully expects that in the spirit of it, that she is not alone, that we are not alone during that time.
Well, and again, growing up, the childhood that I have, we never made altars, put them in our house or have pictures of loved ones. So I know from a culture perspective, I find this very interesting because it's so different than what I grew up with. And the only reference I have to this is when I was in college, I had a really great professor, and we went to their house for dinner one time. And again, they were remembering their loved ones, and they had in the corner of their room, they had, a picture, and they had an item of theirs, and they had incense, and they had food on this table. And I remember just wondering, and I eventually did ask a couple questions, but I was just like, what is this? And they were kind of explaining, although it's not, it wasn't the same culture. They were from Iran. But it was still interesting. I think it's still that concept of, hey, we're just remembering our loved ones, and we have this set up here, and we want, like, the family is remembering them. And so there's a space for them in their living room. Again, I didn't get into the same types of questions I'm asking you around, is the expectation that the food's gone or they really enjoy it? But I kind of took that as almost just a memorial to them, and it was kind of honoring them. And since then, I've always kind of grappled between how far, and I know this is my own thinking, I'm not expecting an answer, but how far do you take that memorial versus, at what point does it stop becoming a memorial and start becoming an invitation for the spirit to come visit? Is kind of where I was balancing. So I appreciate you kind of bring in those details.
Sure. Isn't it interesting how much more, as cultures around the world, we're finding that we have more in common than we do different? That we have the same reverence for those who've gone before us, whether it be in the form of ancestors or family members. In many Asian cultures, they revere those who have gone before them in the same way that we do in my culture. So some of them are year round and some of them are once a year, but even between American culture and Hispanic culture, the sense of that we can come together and say, well, it's like Memorial Day, and you have some point of reference to what it means to have a reverence or to have something in honor of someone who's gone before.
Yeah. Yeah, that is really cool. So you had mentioned that you kind of celebrate this with your mom, and it's kind of a way to just honor your heritage and your family system. Do you celebrate this with your kids now?
I do not, which is, I'm just being honest with you on that. We have in the past when they were smaller, and we have this sense, but it's always been something that my mom's called us back to as a family. So it's not something that I've ever been in charge of, so to speak, myself, except when I celebrated, it would have been when I was teaching it in the classroom. And so I had it at home. But after I retired from the university, then I kind of got away from the practice of doing it because I knew my mom would always do it. And she needed help. There was one year, like I said, it took up an entire room. I kid you not. It was her entire living room. And that was probably the biggest altar that we had built at that time. It was really important to my mom. And it might have been just right after she lost her dad.
Yeah.
If I recall. And it was just really fresh.
So, Mari, something that just popped in my head, and I really would like to get your opinion on this. And do you think there's a difference, or what is the difference for you when you're looking at your culture and building the altars? What's the difference between memorial and worshiping for you? Do you think that that's a form of worshiping your ancestors, or do you see where I'm trying to go with my question?
Ooh, yes, great question. There is a difference. There's definitely a difference. I think when my mom does it is a sense of more reverence and keeping tradition than it is worship. But I get what you mean by that. There's a certain ceremony and reverence that it seems almost like worship, doesn't it? Especially if you put, like I mentioned, a picture of the Virgin of Guadalupe on there. And the altars become more religious or less religious depending on where you are and who you're with. Mm. My mom happens to have almost life-size statue of the Virgin of Guadalupe in her house. It sits by her bedside with a rosary. So Probably for her, there's more worship involved there than there would be for someone like me. I'm much more Americanized. I've lived here most of my life. So while I respect the traditions, probably in practice, we were raised American Baptist, so a little less Catholic.
Okay.
That makes a difference.
I was raised Baptist, and I'm having like flashbacks from my childhood, and I was like, I don't even know how you even bring these two together at this point. So that's funny. Mary.
I know. And what's hilarious is that I shouldn't say hilarious, it was sometimes painful growing up. My father was American Baptist pastor, and my mom was a practicing Catholic for the longest time. Yeah. So my household was divided. So to say that we had these altars, but we had fewer of them growing up that were as elaborate. My father's passed away now. So my mom's altars now have become extremely elaborate compared to when I was growing up. So yeah.
Well, I can understand, how do you balance between traditions and culture? Because, there's something about you don't want to lose those cultural ties or those traditions. Because again, if you're thinking of those from a space of, honoring where you came from, remembering your loved ones, like that's all I think nice. And those are the nice parts of that. But then if you balance that against your, religious views, and I'll just take your household growing up, you have a strong Baptist father and a Catholic mother, then you have these traditions. I could see how there would be this friction even between what a Catholic believes versus a Baptist. Then you throw on your Hispanic culture and all these altars. I can't even imagine how you would work through that.
Oh, well, I mean, we survived it more than we worked through it. Which is right. We survived it more than we worked through it. I mean, there were times where my dad just wasn't having it. And there were times when my mom was like, it didn't matter. She was doing it no matter what. And that's my mom's spirit, though. And that was my father's spirit, too. He came to respect those traditions. My father was American. My mom's Mexican. So I should point that out that way. He's American Baptist pastor. So that was confusing sometimes. And it came into contradiction. But if you can see how strong my mom was, my sister and I both in profession came out being Spanish instructors and professors. So
I noticed that, but I wasn't about to say anything.
Yeah, so in a way she won that battle. She won that battle. And my sister is actually a middle school Spanish teacher in Colorado. So she does that as well. So it's super important to us to keep our traditions, and we do show them. My children are very aware of the Day of the Dead traditions because as they grew up, we lived in the same town as my mom. So at that time of year, she would have them help with the altar, and we would make Day of the Dead bread, and we would make sugar skulls. And my mom it was a time for her to share with them her oral history of our family in Mexico, which could be a novel in and of itself. It's so complicated and contradictory and conflicty. And
why haven't we done that yet,
Mary? Because there are too many people whose names need to be changed.
Oh gosh.
So Mary, I have a question for you too. When you were going through I don't even know what to describe it, and I can't remember all of them, and I don't want to be disrespectful, but I think it was like the different levels of hell. There's all those activities that they were doing, and the game at the end. Does your culture, when it's this time of year, do they have any kind of activities that the family partakes in that kind of mimics those, or is those just completely separate? I guess my question is, what activities are part of the celebration?
Well, for families, honestly, like preparation, and a lot of it has kind of mixed in with American culture because there are several states in the United States, Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, where you're going to find Day of the Dead celebrations and parades. And it kind of has mixed in with Halloween. So, there are costumes. I mean, there are big parades that we have. People dress up. And I know, Jeannie, you might have seen in that same post that I did with my mom's altar that she and I dressed up as the Lady of Death, which is La Catrina. And essentially it's the whole idea, the spirit of the Day of the Dead now is the sense of that life is to be celebrated. and that we accept death as a natural part of life. But that while you're here, like the one thing that my father used to say, which my mom would agree with, and it's kind of the spirit of Day of the Dead, is that don't be so heavenly that you're of no earthly use.
Oh.
So it's just a way of doing that. Yeah, don't be so heavenly that you're of no earthly use. So it's the sense of the Day of the Dead with families. I mean, some of them go trick or treating. I mean, that's just part of it. Even in Mexico, other parts, they've started to mix those traditions together because it's so strong. But parades, costumes, parties, dances. Well, I think one of the most beautiful movies that I've seen recently in the last few years that really, if you've seen Coco, that Disney's Coco, that is a beautiful display of Day of the Dead traditions and conflicts, and really paints this panorama around the family and activities and traditions and things that actually I think are explained really, really well. My sister goes so far as to show that movie in class to help explain some movies. But it's called Coco.
It's so funny that you say that, Mary, because I have a church group that we go to. It's a Bible study every Wednesday. And we were talking, our podcast comes up quite a bit. And we were talking about the Halloween themes that we were doing in the different recordings. And I was telling them that, we're meeting with Mary and we're recording this episode. And one of the people in the group goes, "Oh, well, you should watch Coco." And I said, "Coco, the movie from Disney?" And she goes, "Yeah." She goes, "I think it's very close to what the Hispanic culture," because I believe her husband is from Mexico. We're just getting to know them, but she even mentioned you should watch Coco. And I thought, I'm going to be completely transparent. I was like, I don't know if that would really give me what I'm looking for. So it's so funny that you say that, because now I'm like, now I'm going to go watch Coco because I'm very interested in all these things.
It's lovely. It really is. It gives, it because it includes some of the folklore and the legends from the things that I mentioned about pre-Mesoamerican cultures. So it includes those traditions along with the traditions of the altar. But more than anything, it talks about the strength of family, which has always been a Hispanic principle. Mm-hmm. Just the value of family, the strength of family, the core of family. Family is everything. Whether a family came before or comes after, it's kind of at the center of our lives, so to speak.
Yeah. I love that. And as you talk, I can see how Day of the Dead kind of overlaps with Halloween, and how, because it is a little confusing for me. But can you maybe talk a little bit about, like, traditionally, what happens on the 31st, and then what happens on the 1st and the 2nd and the 3rd? Like, what does that look like traditionally?
Sure. So for most Mexicans, October 31st is a day of preparation. So families begin to clean and wash the graves that they go to the cemeteries to visit in order to decorate them. They also go to the mercados, the markets, to get the traditional supplies for Dia de los Muertos. And so some of these I've mentioned already, but the supplies that we get are sugar skulls. Now my mom was old school. She made us make them at home. Instead of buy them at the store. And she had a mold and everything, and we had to make our own.
Okay, I was going to ask if you had to sculpt those, because I knew you could write. I wasn't sure you were an artist too, so that's
no, I'm terrible at sugar skulls, and it showed. And then pan de muerto, you buy the bread of the dead. Now in where we live now, because of the Hispanic population that's growing, you can buy some of these things pre-made or already made at the local stores. But usually it's made at home, and it's usually round in shape to represent the cycle of life and death. There are a few versions of the bread depending on the region that you are in. And then you might be surprised that the flower of Day of the Dead is the marigold, called the cempasúchil. Mm-hmm. So the marigold is known as the flower of the dead, or the flower of memory, because it was used by the Aztecs based on a legend that said it appeared by the thousands in the field after priests asked for the gods to give them a sign concerning the souls of the dead. So we get an abundance of that. Now, my mom finds it really hard to find marigolds in season.
Yes, in the middle of the Midwest, yes.
In the middle of the Midwest in November. So my sister usually has to have them shipped in for her. So she ships them, and then we get candles, which so we get an abundance of candles. And my mom, probably that one time we made that one in the room, there were over 125 candles.
Wow.
I'm pretty sure that we had to light. I remember that was a pain, but I love my mom, so that was fine. We get incense. So the copal incense is a pine resin, and you can have a pine scent. It can really be anything at this point that you want. So we get that family, we get that. And then the really fun family activity is papel picado, which is that fancy paper that you see with all the little shapes cut out of it that you'll see on altars. That's multicolored, and it has like little figures of skeletons and skulls or really fancy little things. And it's just, it's the same way that you would make a paper snowflake. Mm-hmm. So it's called papel picado, but you would do that for Day of the Dead. Now, my sister, in her observance, likes to go to the local market where she is, and she likes to buy chapulines. Take a guess at what a chapulín is. It's edible, but you wouldn't think it's edible.
Oh Lord, I don't know. There's a few like Hispanic cuisines that I don't partake in. Is it something that I'm probably not gonna?
Girl, I'm Hispanic and I do not partake in this one. Chapulines are grasshoppers. So grasshoppers are a common. They're a common snack during the holiday. They are a common snack during the holiday.
Do they at least cover them in chocolate?
Yeah. My sister orders them in chocolate, cinnamon, and sugar.
Like that makes it any better, though. I mean, come on.
Right. I'm with you guys. There's certain things that I don't touch. And I mean, there are certain things that I won't eat.
Yeah. Yep.
I have my principles. But okay, so October 31st, you gather all your stuff up. You gather up your shelf or your table or whatever you're going to use. You put your big mantel, your tablecloth across it, or your papel picado, your decorative papers, and you do your pictures and everything. And then November 1st is Dia de los Angelitos. So that, again, is the day that we celebrate children who have died too young, or who were stillborn or anything like that. And that's where you'll get your toys and your candy and all of that out. And then November 2nd is when you'll put out your pictures of your grandparents or your aunts and your uncles, your great grandma, any of those things. My mom will put her statue of the Virgin of Guadalupe on there and the rosaries and things like that. And during the second day, now I'm more accustomed to having the parties and the parades on November 2nd than November 1st. November 1st is a much more solemn day of remembrance, if that makes any sense. And November 2nd is going to be a much more hearty, festive, while solemn Memorial Day, is when you're going to have all your parties and those kinds of things. So people will have parties for November 2nd, and then they'll invite you over. It'll feel like a Halloween party. Oh, but it's not. And that's where you would dress up. You would dress up as the Lady of Death, or you could dress as an angel or a devil. Because it represents heaven and the underworld. So, and mariachis or the gentleman death or any of those things. And you'll see the people paint their faces white, and it looks like they're painting them as like with skulls on their faces. And that's in representation of the Lady of Death, or the cycle of life is celebrating life and death, and it's just a cycle. So you'll have that. Your big parades will usually happen on November 2nd, and they'll have fireworks, giant puppets, flowers, and people dressed as skeletons or the Lady of Death, Lady Catrina. So you'll have those things. So it feels like it overlaps with the Halloween celebration. It really does. Yeah. And more families are opting to do that, right? Like when my mom and I celebrated on the 2nd, though, I mean, she made this big thing of tamales and a special drink, atole, which she home makes, and we had festive mariachi music, and we essentially did karaoke most of the night.
Mary, you had me at tamales. The rest of it's like the cherry on top.
So, Mary, you mentioned the Lady of the Death a couple different times. Can you give a quick, like, who is she? What is that person?
La Catrina. La Catrina, or the Lady of Death, is the one of the most popular costumes during Dia de los Muertos. She is represented as a skeleton, usually wearing a large hat and a very fancy dress. She is just representative of life and death in one and the celebration of it, how elegant and beautiful it is, the cycle of life. So she's no one in particular. The image that we usually see of her was painted by an artist back at around the turn of the 20th century. And so that's what the image is based on. And so when you see her, she's pretty well known, but it's usually a skeleton with a large fancy hat with flowers hanging off of it. And it's just meant to represent the beauty that is life and death personified.
So it's not part of the legend or anything like that.
No, she's not part of the legend. She's become more an artist rendition.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay.
An artist rendition, yeah, to represent the day.
Yeah. So I guess is there any like misconceptions or misunderstandings about the Day of the Dead that you've experienced or that you would like to kind of dispel here?
Usually that people think that it's Halloween. Usually that's the biggest misconception, that it's just another Halloween celebration, that it's not really. And because people seem to be festive and happy during it, that it's not a solemn occasion. So when I say it's Memorial Day and then you see a giant parade with people like dancing and and singing and having treats and stuff, it doesn't seem like, then that point of reference gets lost, because you're like, well, we don't do that when we go out to the cemetery and put, flowers on grandma's grave. We go to church or we have a solemn moment, and it's a moment of sadness and reflection. It's not an occasion to throw a party.
Right.
And yeah, and that's the biggest misconception. That's the difference. It's not Halloween. It just feels Halloweeny because of the time of year that it fell on, and that truly had to do more with the fact that the Spanish conquistadors came to the New World and then imposed their belief system and their timetable when those things were celebrated within the Catholic calendar. Mm-hmm. Because originally it was celebrated in August.
Right. Yeah, you had said that.
Yeah. It was originally celebrated in August. So what happened was that obviously indigenous believers of the new faith or Catholicism then, in order to continue practicing their beliefs, and it seemed like an easy merge, to be honest, because if you remember that I said that the Spaniards themselves had, during All Saints Day and All Souls Day, would leave wine and bread at the graves of their loved ones and would light candles and put flowers on. So it just seemed like something familiar to the indigenous culture. It seemed like something they could work with.
So if it was originally in August and they moved it, I mean, what was the original significance of it being in August?
That is a great question. I actually don't remember that little piece of information. I think it was because it was closer to a harvest situation.
Gotcha.
But to be honest, I can't remember right now off the top of my head why it was August versus any other time of the year. I just know that within the new Catholic calendar, it's that they merged those much in the same way. If you remember that some believers merged Christmas, which most people, not to start anything, another topic, but most people believe that Jesus was actually born closer to April rather than December. But then, cultures merged and beliefs merged to make that easier for believers to celebrate without being persecuted. Right. So, yeah.
Mary, is there and I'm gonna say this all sorts of wrong, so just bear with me, but is there a dark side to this holiday? And I'm trying to equate it back to Halloween, although I know it's not the same. But, in Halloween, you have the lighter side of things like trick-or-treating and decorating and Halloween parties. But you also have some groups of people that use this for an opportunity to try to punch a hole in that veil that they think is thinning and do rituals and acts. So I'm just curious, for the Day of the Dead, is there anything like that goes on?
The only thing that I can think of was from my family member talking to me more about her experience in the Dominican Republic and feeling that had a darker feeling to it than what she was used to. But honestly, to my knowledge, I mean, all I've known of the holiday itself has been redeeming and light and solemn and significant as a family event. So personally, I couldn't attest to anything dark to it. Academically, there might be something, but nothing so significant as where, the beginnings of Halloween and how some of those things play out are probably different. And someone else might have something else to say about that. But me personally, I don't see any of the darkness associated with some of the Halloween aspects to it.
Well, that's good.
Yeah. Yeah. At least in my experience, that's what it's been. And just to kind of come full circle on that. So after this November 2nd and 3rd passes, on November 4th, all the candles are blown out, which is a sign to the spirits that it's time for them to return to the spirit world. Families take down their altars or ofrendas and store everything away until the next year when they will celebrate their loved ones again.
Oh, very cool. Very cool.
Yeah.
This has been really, really cool. And I have one more question, I guess. Is there a question we didn't ask that you wanted to talk about? Anything that you're, that some nuance to the Day of the Dead that we didn't ask about because we don't know to ask?
Oh, no. I think you guys are really good about all of your questions. And excellent listeners, might I add, because like I told you, I'm a useless fountain of information sometimes, or fountain of useless information. So I have a lot stored in the brain.
Yeah.
But no. I think you've asked really great questions, and there are questions that I'm glad that people can learn more about. I mean, I just would want them to come away with the feeling that, this is not just a Halloween celebration to a Hispanic family. Or Latino family. It really is a family-oriented time of reflection and redemption and love for those who have come before them and those who will go after them. So I think it's a really beautiful part of my culture, and I'm really appreciative that I had a mother that that allows me to participate in it every year.
Well, and I think that, honestly, that's the reason I wanted to have this conversation with you, because I was so impressed and intrigued by your post from last year and watching you celebrate that holiday with your mom. So, so thanks for sharing that, even on a personal level too. So,
oh, thank you.
Yeah.
And I had no idea that Disney got it so right, because I know a lot of times in the movies they get it so wrong. So I am going to go and watch Coco with the family and say, hey, this is what we talked about on our episode, and try to get a little bit more understanding of what this holiday is. So thank you, Mari, for coming on and sharing some of those details.
You're welcome. Like I said, and I think you're right. Sometimes the movies don't get it specifically right. But if anything, I think they've captured the spirit of the family, the spirit of the tradition, and of the holiday. So I'm okay to recommend it to you for sure.
Yeah. Now, you, as we said in the beginning, you're an author and you do some other cultural education things that I've seen. I really hope I can participate in one of these days. But tell us about your current projects. What are you working on right now?
Oh, I have 5 current projects. I'm an author who publishes episodically or weekly on something we call Kindle Vella. So if you're a Kindle reader, then you have access to Kindle Vella, where you get a set of tokens to open up stories or full-length novels. And the first 3 chapters are always free, and then they literally give you tokens to keep reading. So I have 5 different projects. I'm an eclectic reader, so I'm an eclectic author. And so I have a project, which is a sequel to a book that I wrote a while back. I've got Broken Road, which is a military drama, family drama, and its sequel, The Long Road Home, is publishing on Kindle Vella right now. I've also got The Date, which is a controversial Right to Die book that has its sequel and All the Little Things We Wanted to Forget, that's publishing weekly on Kindle Vella. And then I have Whispers. So if you like serial killers and supernatural, then I've got that. I've also got a crime drama called Girl with a Gun. It's my assassin novel.
Okay.
And then my final project is called The Black Dragon Diaries, and it is a sci-fi light adventure through through some characters who transform into different kinds of animals. So,
Mary, I was not expecting sci-fi from you.
That's your father's influence. It's your father's influence.
That's awesome.
Sure, he'll get a kick out of that. So all of those are publishing weekly on Kindle Vella, and you can find me under Mari Beck, Maribeck.
Awesome.
Well,
awesome.
I'm going to go look for a couple of those because they sound really good. So I'm definitely going to go take a look. So thank you.
Thank you very much for having me today.
It's been great, and it's been nice to chat with you. It's been a long time since I've seen you. So
I know.
Yes.
But I appreciate the opportunity, and I really appreciate what you guys are doing here. Food for thought, everything. I mean, it's just really great. I really appreciate you guys.
Oh, thank you. We appreciate you coming on too.
Yes, thank you. That's when we hear from people, the good, bad, and the ugly, we just appreciate it because people are listening. So it's kind of nice to kind of hear that. So thank you, Mary. And again, I know we just met, and so this is kind of awkward, but very nice speaking to you. Jamie spoke very highly of you before coming on, and I can see why now. And so again,
thank you.
I have a better understanding. I'm not an expert by any means, but at least I know more coming out of this conversation than I did coming into it. So that's all I could ask for.
Yes.
Yes.
Well,
thank you guys.
Yes, thank you. That was probably the best example of a Midwest goodbye we could ever display, my friends.
Bye-bye. See you later. Grab your jacket. Yes. One more thing.
Okay. Well, this has been great. And we appreciate everyone joining us on Roundtable Mindset. And we hope you join us for our next less spooky episode in the beginning of November. Thank you, guys.
Goodbye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
This episode was recorded and edited by Mahlon and Jamie. Music was Whack-A-Lantern by Ender.
If you want to interact with us, you can find us on Facebook, Instagram, and the app formerly known as Twitter, just by searching Roundtable Mindset Podcast. If you want to email us, our email address is roundtablemindset@gmail.com. Or you can call us at 402-819-8999. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time at the Roundtable.